Great. So with that, let's dive into it. So every year, the Institute of International Education releases their annual Open Doors report, and this report does a great job of telling folks where students are going and how many students are coming to the United States to study. But it really doesn't get at the motivations behind the reasons why students come to study and how they go ahead and make those decisions. What we're going to do today is actually explore that through our research. So in our research, we asked why. Why do students decide to study outside of their home country? What influences them as they make those decisions? What are their concerns? How do they communicate? And what can we do better as marketers and admissions professional to better meet those students' needs? So a little information about the study itself. It was a survey of non-U.S. college-bound students. It was done in January 2013, and it was conducted as a joint effort between Noel Levitz and CollegeWeekLive. The data source was CollegeWeekLive's international students registrants, and we had 1,980 surveys completed. And actually, just a little housekeeping before we get into the actual presentation. We are going to have time at the end for lots of questions. So if you could hold questions till the end, we're happy to answer them at that point. So let's first dig into what the data respondents looked like. So in terms of their year of high school graduation, 72% of them were seniors, and you'll see there were smaller populations from juniors, sophomores, and freshmen, with 4% of respondents being parents. In terms of the citizenship, we were excited to see that responses from 146 countries, so we really did have a global response. For the purposes of analysis throughout today's presentation, we separated out China and India from Asia, and then grouped the rest of Asia together in one area. And you'll see we had a wide distribution of responses. Latin America are Spanish-speaking countries, and the other countries from Central America and Caribbean are ones that are non-Spanish speaking. In terms of their likelihood to study outside of their country, early in the survey we asked students how likely they were to study outside of their home country, and you'll see that 89% of respondents said they were at least 50% likely to study outside of their home country. And so for the purposes of analysis of this survey, we took that 89% to be qualified respondents. So the data that we're going to share today is just of the population of folks that said that they were at least 50% likely to study outside their home country. So let's start with digging into what are the expectations of these international students. So we started by asking students how many colleges they expect to apply to, and you'll see that a very large percentage plan to apply to many colleges. So looking at 44% plan to apply to 3 to 5 colleges, 27% plan to apply to 6 to 10 colleges, and 9% plan to apply to 11 to 15, and 4% 16 plus. But when you dig at this and start to take a regional view, there's a few data elements that come forward. So sub-Saharan Africa had the lowest applications, where 28% expected to apply to 2 or less, where China had the highest applications, where 28% of respondents expected to apply to 11 or more colleges. So obviously key takeaway here is that there's a lot more competition for mind share and for brand recognition within Chinese applicants. We then asked, what is the main concern that might prevent you from attending a college or university outside of your home country? And you'll see overwhelmingly funding was the top issue, with 56% of respondents citing that as the main concern that may prevent them from attending abroad. And then you'll see there's a wide distribution of smaller percentages around safety in the surrounding area at 8%, safety on campus with 6%, no friends or family nearby, 6%, and my parents are concerned at 5%, and then language barrier and cultural differences. When you actually slice this data regionally, you start to get some different findings. So China, for example, is least concerned about funding, with only 40% of respondents citing that as the top issue, but they were most concerned about safety in the surrounding area, with 18% of respondents saying that they were most concerned about safety. So as you think about communicating with the Chinese applicants, clearly that is a concern that's weighing on their mind. And then when you look at Canada, Canada was most likely to get homesick, with 20%, with being no friends or family nearby. And I think that also makes a lot of sense when you think about Canadians are not going to have a language or cultural differences. So the fact that they would be away from family or friends becomes a more important topic. We then, with funding being such an important topic, we then said, okay, asked students, how do you expect to fund your education? And it was interesting that overwhelmingly students expected to get some aid, whether that was from a U.S. they expected to get some support from a U.S. college, whether that was financial aid or a scholarship. So you'll see between 70 and 80% across all of the regions. But again, when you start to look at this regionally, there's some differences that are certainly worth noting. In Asia, in the area of Asia that excluded India and China, you'll see that 75% of respondents expected some type of financial aid or scholarship, and that was also similar across the Middle East, Northern Africa, and then Sub-Saharan Africa. It's also interesting to note that when you look at the 2012 Open Doors report, 21.5% of students actually report a U.S. university being their primary source of funding. So what's interesting here is that you're seeing a real disconnect around what students expect to get from colleges and what they actually receive. So interesting challenge for marketers is to say, and for admissions folks is to say, okay, are we really addressing the concerns and the expectations of college, of these prospective international students? Next, we're going to focus on influences and what are the key influences affecting international students. First, we took a look at the role of parents, and I think it's really important when you look at this data, as you know, with any data, this is about the perceptions. So we asked international students, you know, how influential are parents, and it was interesting to see, and we were surprised to see that 42% said that they would make the decision, with 56% saying that they make the decision with their parents. And as a parent, I find this data a little bit disturbing and probably not as realistic as the reality is, because they're expecting funding from the parents. But important to see that they perceive themselves as driving this decision in 42% of the cases. Also important to see that European students think they're in charge. They were an outlier here, where 62% of them said that they make the decision themselves. The next slide is really around, we then said, okay, you know, what factors influence your decision to attend university outside of your home country? And it showed that without any doubt, the biggest driver was having a dream school in mind. And with over 60% of the students saying that they had a particular school in their mind as they were going through the application process. And this is, you know, pretty staggering and probably a tough challenge for schools that don't have the same brand recognition as some of the more applied to colleges. So it just underscores the importance of really building relationships and your brand preference with international students. But it's also interesting when you start to look at this data at a regional level. You'll see some interesting variations. So number 2 for Asia and Latin America was attending an international high school. So they've essentially been on this international school track through high school, and studying abroad is just studying outside of their home country is just an extension of that. You see on Sub-Saharan Africa, their number 2 option was no higher education opportunities in their home country. Number two for India was my siblings studied abroad, so there's some form of family history or legacy to studying abroad. And then for China, the number two option was to avoid home country testing and requirements. So it's an option that they are choosing to study outside. Next question. After rankings and websites, we then went and said, okay, how influential are the following experiences on your application decisions? And you'll see that after rankings and websites, we were really excited by the fact that conversations were most influential. And I think the university websites and college rankings all makes an awful lot of sense, and I am sure that the admissions and marketing folks on this in this session spend a lot of time and energy really working on optimizing those two points for international students. But what's really interesting is that the next two popular items were conversations with current students and college representatives. And so, you know, those of you on the call who do an awful lot of traveling should feel good about the impact that those decisions can, that those conversations can have. But it also indicates that there's an opportunity to think about conversations with students that are on your campus that might not be part of your current communication plan. And let me look at some more. There's a couple other data points here. The other thing that we thought was interesting was campus tours ranked number one among U.S. students. But when you look at it for international students, it ranks lower, and that makes sense, right? Because we know that a lot of international students, there's a barrier to them getting on your campus. But I think the interesting piece here is how do you, in your communication and your marketing to international students, give them a sense of what the campus is like? And I think that's a challenge and something that is important to consider. The other piece that was interesting was that Asia, China, and India had the most significant preference for chatting with students or having conversations with students over representatives. So to me, the opportunity is around how do you think about leveraging your international students on campus, and how do you facilitate conversations between your students that are on campus with prospective students so that international students feel like there's a place for them on campus. The other thing that was interesting for us was that the independent counselors and the agents were much lower when you looked at them in aggregate, but actually when you looked at it by region, it made sense to us that independent counselors and agents were rated highest in China and sub-Saharan Africa. We then asked students about their ability to visit campus in person. And I think what's really important about this slide is this is their perceived ability to visit a campus in person. We saw that 24% of students expected to be able to visit all potential colleges once or more, and we described that as full access. Again, they perceived that they were going to be able to do this. This is not that they actually did visit. Important distinction here. Moderate access, we had 32% of students who said that they expected to be able to visit their top choice colleges once. 30% of students were low access, meaning they might visit one or more colleges, and then no access. And this was students, 14%, who said they were not going to visit any campuses. And while we were shocked by the fact that 54% of students thought that they would have some access, either moderate or full access to visiting a college, it was interesting that, and important to note, that 44% said that they would likely not visit any campuses. So great opportunity there to think about how do you address and recruit students who overwhelmingly or large percentage are not going to be able to visit your campus. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Krista to talk through the SUNY case study.